Hello again and welcome back. Today we will be discussing free will and determinism once more, because simply some people do not seem to admit to the case that everything we do is determined by actions outside of our power of control. Now I have a playlist in which I talk about free will and determinism from the lens of philosophy and logic, and also from a theological perspective. But since for you philosophy is actually controversial, and the existence of God and the truthfulness of some specific religion, since you do not want to accept logic as well, I have decided to bring a scientific perspective into this. The problem is, science doesn't actually tell us whether we are free or not. We actually infer from the scientific data that it is either we are free or not. It's pretty much like evolution in biology. As much as biology tells us that we share a common ancestor with apes, it doesn't tell us that creation is wrong. It doesn't tell us that man was made in God's image. It is from analyzing the data we infer that certain hypotheses are actually either true or wrong. Science doesn't tell us that this is correct or this is wrong, because those things are actually metaphysical or rather philosophical things that only philosophy and logic would be able to disprove them using scientific data. This data itself doesn't concern itself with the truthfulness of a metaphysical or philosophical hypothesis. We use the data to infer or rather deduct that those claims are actually either true or false. By understanding biology, we know that we share a common ancestor with apes. Therefore, the story about Adam and Eve is actually incorrect, because the process in which we come about is actually evolution, rather than two first man and woman having sex and producing all of people. Therefore, what we're gonna do today is we're gonna see determinism and free will from the lens of these sciences: biology, physics, psychology, and neurology. Of course, those sciences do not tell us that we are free or that our actions are entirely determined. It only shows us data, and we infer from this data that we are either free or determined. One should be actually dishonest to infer the opposite. One should be actually very dishonest from analyzing fossil record, DNA resemblance, vestigial organs, etc., etc., and still claim that we are created rather than evolved into what we are now. Then let's start. 1. Neurology. It is well known in neuroscience that the brain acts before you do. But the problem here is, if we say that the brain acts before you do, we accidentally point that you might be something rather than just your brain, like something like spirit or a soul. Neuroscience doesn't say that. Neuroscience deals with the human as a brain, because this is what we are, the nervous system. We are bodies. Then if we are bodies, we are the brain. The brain is controlled by physical processes. Now, if I am entirely physical processes, I find it real hard to know where is me in all of those physical processes. Those determined physical processes determine who I am. Now, of course, when I say the brain acts before you do, it's just a linguistic thing. When I say you, I say that you that emerges from brain function, the you that is consciousness, the you being self-awareness, the you that is conscious of being yourself. But since that is only dictated by brain function, which is actually physical processes, I can hardly say you emerge from those things, but you do not actually control them. You are a result of brain neurons functioning, but you cannot actually control them. You're only a result of those things. Brain function is actually the action, but your self-awareness and consciousness is only a reaction. But a reaction can never control the first action. Therefore, in neuroscience, it's impossible that you are free. Of course, before every action that we do, brain activity could be recorded happening hundreds of milliseconds before doing the thing. It's only that the brain chooses to do a certain action, and after that, we become self-aware of it. And inside that self-awareness, we think that it is us who do thus. but it's the other way around. Our self-awareness of that action is only a reaction of brain function deciding to do X. Now, if I am entirely brain activity, or rather brain function, this is entirely physical. The brain is entirely physical, and we all know that physics are actually governed by laws. Therefore, I could only say, since I am a body and I am a brain which has physical processes that give result to the sensation, or rather the feeling of being me. If me is entirely physical, if the self is entirely physical, I could only say that the self is governed by physical processes or laws that we cannot control, because we cannot control the laws of physics. If I am a body and the body exists in the physical world, it must adhere and submit to the physical laws that are dictated by the universe. Rather than that, we might be free. But we need to not be physical in order to be free, like a spirit or a light or some type of soul. But if we were like that, we need to be eternal, because if we start in time, we become a slave to the circumstance. If we start in time, it only shows that something else rather than us made us start in time. And if we didn't control our very start, our very beginning, how could we control what happens afterwards? If our fundamental basis is actually determined by something else outside of our power, how can we control those things that would emerge from that controlled beginning? The brain, being physical, could be hindered or compromised by other physical processes. You feel that your ability to have good decisions is actually impeded when you are lacking sleep. You have mood swings and you feel angry and more irritated when you are tired. You drink alcohol or smoke weed, and your whole character changes. You feel that your whole character changes from something which is entirely physical, which is actually making a lot of sense when we are tackling this in the lens of neuroscience. The brain being only a thing, a physical thing, makes you that emerges from the brain subject to those physical things. And this physical thing, when actually presented by an intruder like alcohol, or not getting enough sleep, or weed, or not having enough nutrition, those physical things actually modify your brain, which gives rise to you. If the brain is modified, you are also modified as a result. There are of course a lot of things that could be said. So the experience of being you could be actually altered by physical injury, weed, alcohol, tobacco, not having enough nutrients, neurological pathology. So this only reinforces the case that what we do and what we are is entirely determined by physical laws that are not in our control. So analyzing free will from the lens of neurology, there are a lot of things that could be said, but I don't want to make this video unnecessarily long. So we will move to the next science, biology. We could infer from biology that genetics actually shape your behavior and how would you act. For example, some genetic disorders could actually predict the individual behavioral tendencies. Of course, your behavior is entirely determined on your genetics, or just rather your sex. Of course, a female's behavior is much different than a male's behavior because of the level of hormones and a lot of things. For example, males tend to compete, desire dominance, and be aggressive and be violent, rather than females. Getting back to neurology and biology, children actually inherit their behavioral tendencies from their parents. I would want to bring data and evidence and studies, but I would just make the video longer. And this is not a channel about science, this is a channel about philosophy. But you could definitely check what I'm saying, whether it's true or wrong. Females, in contrary to males, tend to be more submissive, more cooperative, more gentle, and more soft. You could only conclude from that your entire biology, your sex and your DNA shapes your personality before you get even to live it. Now wait a minute, does this actually mean that essence precedes existence rather than existence precedes essence, like the French philosopher Sartre said. Well, there's a problem here. If essence precedes existence, this actually doesn't mean that you are true, that you are truly free. If essence precedes existence, you must necessarily not be hindered by physical laws. Therefore, you must not belong to the physical world. You need to be a soul or spirit, untouchable, and you need to be eternal, never start in time. Because as I said just a while ago, if you started in time, something else made you start in time. Therefore, you didn't choose the very first thing of your life. How could you choose freely all the other things which will come after? Then, if we say that essence precedes existence because of biology, because of our DNA, therefore I am before I even exist. The problem is this essence must physically exist in order to be manifested. Therefore, existence again precedes essence, because even if we say that essence, this DNA, this biology, it is you, it needs to exist physically to give rise to you. Therefore, we give back to the existence precedes essence. Biology must physically exist first in order to give rise to your identity. 3. Physics. The universe in physics is just a big chain of cause and effects. The first cause being the Big Bang as we know it. Therefore, everything that follows from it is just an effect which changes to be a cause, that gives an effect, that changes again to be a cause, that gives other effect. Therefore, everything that we are now is merely a reaction to the very first action, which is the Big Bang. Now, there is an idea that if we could know the position of every atom in the universe, we could definitely know the future. Everything that we do is merely an effect of that first cause that we did not control. Now, if we could not control the action, how could we control the reaction, which is us? We are effects that result in other effects by changing to be an action in that big chain of causality, cause and effect. Now, if we get back to the Big Bang and we have changed nothing and everything proceeded as it did before, we would be doing that here in this given time. You watching that video then, and I am making it now. Now, in the field of quantum mechanics, things are not actually determined, but rather random and chaotic. Now, if we say that, no, we are free. Why are you free then? Because our actions are not determined. Okay? Then why are you free? How are you free? Our actions are random. This actually just pushes the problem even further. We cannot be free by being random. It is either we are free or we are not free. Now, randomness and determinism are still in the category of not free, because what you will do and who you are will be still subject to random processes rather than your own choice. If the universe is governed by determined laws, we are not free. And if the universe is governed by random laws, we are still not free, because we are subject to either determinism, which we did not choose, or randomness, again, we do not choose. Either slave to determinism or to randomness, but never free. Now, the fourth science, psychology. Of course, in psychology, we all know that our childhood shapes who we will become in the future. Now, since our childhood could not be chosen by us, childhood is, it just happens. We do not choose our parents. We do not choose our country. We do not choose the type of school we go to. We do not choose our friends. We do not choose our sex. We do not choose our neighborhood. We do not choose anything of what makes our childhood. Then if my childhood is this constrained and controlled, how could me emerging from this constrained childhood be free at all? During our childhood, we gather libido and trauma that expresses itself when we are older. You go to a therapist and tell him what you dream, what you think, what you feel. From that, he tries to guess some event that happened to you in your childhood that made a specific complex, that made you you. Siblings never experience the same childhood. A child never experiences the same parents. Our childhood is full with dreams and disappointments, filled with anger and hopes, filled with feelings of inferiority and disability, filled with love and attachment towards specific people or specific activities or specific places, filled with wishes that could never get realized in the childhood because of our powerlessness. This entire psychological box of your childhood only gets manifested when you are older, with the ability of power, money, and independence. Our society conditions us, our teachers, our parents, our family in general, suppresses our anger, suppresses our sexual energy, suppresses our disappointment, our frustration, our selfishness, our ego, our desire for freedom, our desire to do whatever we want. Our society conditions us to only do the activities that only the society approves. Our society conditions us to live as it wants. The child doesn't find any other way but to suppress his energy and to channel it to something else, something which is approved by his surrounding. Therefore, the individual is not really being himself, but rather what the society wanted. Anyway, that was it for the scientific perspective about free will and determinism, even though it was a lot mixed by philosophy, but we could only use philosophy to infer that we are either free or determined, because science doesn't care about those things. The goal of science is not to actually tackle those philosophical points of view. Therefore, we need to use philosophy to infer. Okay, I want to add something, a rather philosophical point of view about free will and determinism, which actually emphasizes the fact that everything we do is not free. Like, whatever choice we choose in life, it's not a free choice. Why? Just ask yourself, would you be doing something else rather than what you are doing right now? If I had the power, the ultimate power, the absolute ultimate power to do whatever I want, would I be recording this video right now, right here? Would I be doing that instead of sitting in a boat surrounded by multiple girls from multiple races? Of course not. Of course you would choose that rather than that. But because you are only confined by this state of place and time, you choose only the best choice from the available options that you have, because you do not have the ultimate power. Would you be watching this video instead of skydiving or parachuting from Mount Everest? I don't know even if that is possible. Would we be eating what is in our kitchen and choosing from the options we have rather than eating the most delicious Italian plate there is? This is an illusion, because you can choose between an apple and a banana. Doesn't mean actually that you are free just because you are free to choose between an apple and a banana. The choices and the options you have are constrained, and if you were really free, you wouldn't have just those options. You would have the absolute power of choosing whatever you want, which is actually self-defeating, because such being does not exist, and you need to be God to have such power. Anyway, that was all for today. Thanks again for coming by, and see you in the next one.